So hey guys, and welcome to episode 9 of Weekly Kaiju Reviews. You've probably noticed we've had a little bit of a change of scenery here. This is simply because the desk that I normally use to review these kind of figures is a little bit too small for this figure, just with the tripod set up and everything as well. It was a bit awkward with Emir, so I thought I'd learn from that and do the larger sort of 12-inch scale figures on the sofa here or somewhere else. I was going to do it in the table in there, but we're having some decorating done, so it's not been free. So for the time being, we got this lovely sofa. So anyway, on to episode 9. Today's review is of the Bandai DX Plasma Walk Gamera from 1995. Now, there's a couple of things to mention, first of all, before I get into reviewing this figure. Now, first of all, this figure is not a vinyl figure. It is an electronic figure. Now, unfortunately, I haven't been able to get it working. I'm not sure whether there's a problem with the battery connectors or whether there's a minor problem with some wiring, but I'm going to be having a look at that and trying to get this fixed. It was relatively cheap, so I don't mind that it's somewhat broken. I mean, on the surface, it's in fantastic condition, but the internals seem to be a little bit messed up. But so I'm not going to be able to demonstrate with this exact figure. However, I will be putting a link in the description to a video of this figure moving that I found. Some other user on YouTube has a video clip of their version of this figure moving about, and it's pretty impressive. So I'm going to drop a link to the description in that. I'll put the link in the description, and if I can get them working, I'll put an annotation right on Gamera's head there. So click on Gamera's face or the link in the description if you want to see the video of him moving. But I'll explain that a little bit more later on in the review. So I'm instantly going to jump into Sculpt. The face, as you can see from this, is really, really nice. I'm just going to move him there. The detailing is really great there. It's got all of these marks on his head. If we open his mouth here, we have individually sculpted teeth, which if you guys have been watching these, you'll know I'm a huge sucker for individual teeth, as well as these tusks. And he has a bit of sculpting on the tongue there, as well as the roof of his mouth, so that's pretty impressive. If we turn around here, he's got these bags under his eyes and stuff, all the really lovely detailing. I might just zoom in a little bit on there so you can see the skin texture. Very, very nicely done. So that's for the face. For the chest, much like the Gamera figure we've already looked at, he has very similar detailing because obviously it's Gamera, but the underneath of this Gamera is in gold, so that's something, but I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. Yes, the sculpting on the rest of the skin is fantastic. You've got some slightly different skin texturing here to the rest of his skin, as you can see. This is more of the armor plating type stuff here, which carries on around the sides. The arms have more or less the same sculpting as the neck, but it's pretty damn good. The hands are really nicely detailed, and there's detailing on the palms as well, which is awesome. The legs, again, skin texture is the same, but it's really, really nicely done. And on the feet. And if we look at the bottom here, there's no detailing on the bottom of the feet, but that is primarily to accommodate these electronic bits. Although there is some detailing on the bottom of the tail where there isn't mechanical stuff going on, so that's pretty interesting. Now if we just turn him around and have a look at his shell, you can see this. Now the shell on this figure isn't quite as nicely detailed as the 6-inch Bandai Gamera that we had a look at a couple of weeks ago. But it's still pretty nice. It's just not as detailed as the rest of the figure, which is a shame because the sculpting on the front of the figure is phenomenal. It looks really, really good, and it looks actually a lot more like the suit. I mean, there's no obviously joining lines or anything like that in the vinyl or anything like that. So there's no nasty lines or anything like that, and the way the sort of skin texture bunches up like that makes it look more like the suit. So it's really, really amazing sculpting on the front, and probably, you know, on par with the X Plus Emir in terms of its sculpting quality on the front. It's just let down somewhat by the shell, and I get that it's from lower quality materials, the shell, but it's a little bit disappointing. But I can overlook the shell because of how just fantastic the rest of the sculpt is. So in terms of paint, not a lot of paint going on here. The whole figure is made from this very, very soft rubber. Now if I just do this, you can see that there's no The arms are hollow, and it's just this very, very soft rubber, which is this green colour. So there's no paint really on the body, it's mainly just this pure green. There is a little bit of shading, but then the main paint application is in the details. So he's got white fingernails and toenails. He has these tusks, but these are actually made from a white plastics. They're not painted. The inside of the mouth is painted pink with some white paint on the teeth. Same for the top of the mouth there. His pupils are just the base rubber green colour, but the eyes are painted white. And that's about it in terms of paint. So not a lot of paint on this figure. But as I mentioned with the previous Gamera figure I looked at, Gamera himself is a pretty monochrome looking character anyway. You know, in his first couple of incarnations he was just almost pure black, but with some detailing on the teeth. And the final sort of Heisei era Gamera before Toto became Gamera, you know, had a bit more colour, and then Toto himself has an incredible amount of colour. He's all brown and yellows and blacks, but Gamera himself is mainly just green. So yeah, not a lot of paint, but the paint is used really, really nicely. And again, this figure looks great. It just looks so much like the suit. If I just raise the camera up slightly here, and we have a little bit more of a zoom into the face, just to take in that detailing. Very, very good sculpt, and the paint job does not hurt it at all. It's a pretty simple paint job, but it complements the fantastic sculpting. So normally I would talk about articulation here, but as I mentioned, this figure is a bit of an unusual one. Inside this figure is machinery, and basically what would happen is you'd put batteries. In fact, I'll show you where the batteries go first. So there's a clip on the bottom of the shell that you undo, and you lift the shell up. And under here you've got space for 4 AA batteries, and you've got a speaker. Now basically what would happen is you put the batteries in, you turn him on with the on switch on his tail there, and he would sort of basically trot along and occasionally open his mouth and, you know, make his iconic roaring sound. Now, as I said, the mechanics seem to be a bit naff on this one. I can't actually get him working, but we can, if we just move around with the mechanism, see where he is articulated. Now he's articulated at the hips here under the rubber, and his legs move back and forth, and they would help. That's how he would move, and you know, his movements would push these wheels, and he'd basically just sort of be able to go along like that. But there would be some movement, and the movement in the legs, if we look, does somewhat move the arms. So there's a bit of articulation in the arms as well. And another feature of the mechanical side of this figure would be that its mouth opens like this. If we just the head tilts down and the jaw opens, and inside there is a light. So yeah, he'd walk along, he'd occasionally open his mouth and make a noise, and there'd be a bit of a light in his mouth. But no, traditionally there's no articulation with this figure. It is purely about the gimmick. And sadly my gimmick was not working when it arrived, so I'm going to have a look at that. I mean, as I said before, I did get this really cheap, so I'm not so bothered about the fact it doesn't work. It still looks fantastic, and to be honest, I wouldn't really use the gimmick that much. And I'm not a collector who really thinks about resale. I collect for myself. I don't really collect with the intention of selling. So the fact that this figure is just going to be sitting on my shelf next to X plus email looking really badass, you know, I don't mind that there's the lack of articulation and a lack of mechanics in it. However, I do like the fact that the lack of articulation means that there's no molding lines, which is a thing that I think ruins quite a lot of figures. So yeah, no articulation, and the gimmick itself is really, really cool. But it sadly doesn't work on this figure. But as I said, I'm going to put another little annotation link on Gamera's face there. So while I'm talking now, either click on Gamera's face or go and check the link in the description to see him moving. And to check out what this figure looks like when it is fully working. So in terms of pricing, I can't really give you an overall estimate because I can't find this figure anywhere else on the internet. It popped up on a seller that I use a lot on eBay, and he was selling it just simply as Gamera figure, and it was about 12 quid. Now, with free postage. Now, I looked up this figure. I didn't know it moved or anything like that, and then when it arrived I found out that there was machinery and stuff, so I started googling electronic Gamera figures or moving Gamera figures, and there was quite a few, but none with this one. But I did find out that this is indeed the Plasma Walk Gamera, but as I said, I can't find it anywhere else online, so I can't really give you a great estimate there. But yeah, I paid 12 quid for this and it was free postage. So in terms of scaling, this guy stands roughly 11 to 12 inches. For scaling, I was going to use X plus Emir, but he's in a little bit of an awkward position on my shelf at the moment. I don't want to risk breaking him, so I'm going to leave him where he is, and I'm going to use some other Gamera figures here as size comparisons. So first of all, here is a 6-inch Bandai Japan Gaios, or Gauss, depending on how you like to say his name. And you can see how he stacks up there. So yeah, I'd say this figure's probably about 11 inches, maybe more towards 11 than 12 actually, as this Gaios is indeed 6 inches. But yeah, it's a really massive figure, and it's not just the height of it, it's the sort of, you know, the width of this figure. I mean, Gaios is quite a wide figure because of its big crazy wings, but I mean, look at that. That's a massive figure, this Gamera. And just to compare it with another Gamera figure, here's the 6-inch Bandai Japan Gamera that we had a look at a couple of weeks ago. And this is the Heisei era Gamera. And here they are side by side, and you can see how tiny the 6-inch Gamera is in comparison to this colossal plasma watt Gamera. Just having mentioned the fact that that smaller Gamera is Heisei era, I'm not as familiar with Gamera as I am with Godzilla. I've seen the films, but Gamera is not as appealing to me, so I can't exactly remember which suit of Gamera this is, but I would say based on this, it's obviously a different suit to this Heisei one, so I would say that this is probably the second Gamera, and it's definitely not Toto, so I would have said this is probably the second Gamera suit. But I will check that and I'll put it down in the description. But yeah, size-wise, it's not going to fit in with your 6 inches, although it probably will fit in with... I've actually tested this next to Emir because they share a space on the shelf. Yeah, it fits in quite nicely with the 12-inch X Plus figures. I mean, he's a little bit wide, and I mean, you know, he's a deep figure if you look at the shell, and then you got the tail and everything. He takes up a lot more space, but yeah, he fits in quite well with X Plus figures. So he's going to look awesome on your shelf regardless. So overall, what do I make of this figure? Well, I'm in sort of two minds. I mean, they're two good minds, don't get me wrong. I don't have anything bad to say about this figure. I am a little bit disappointed that the mechanics on mine don't seem to be working. But as I said, I got it for such a cheap price that I'm not really that bothered. And from what I can tell by having a bit of a tinker around, it does seem like it might just be an issue with the battery slots. But either way, I love the gimmick when you do see it in action, and I love this figure. I mean, even if this figure was just this as it is without any mechanics, the sculpting is fantastic. The paint job is sparse, but again, really well used. And yeah, it's just such a big, dominating figure. The mouth detail is really astonishing. It's just a really nice figure, and it is let down. This particular one is let down by the fact it's not working. But overall, as a product, I would highly recommend the Plasma Walk Gamera if you can find it. If I'm going to keep checking, if I do find any online, I'll put them in the description, or I'll probably put a link to on the blog, on the Weebly page, or on Facebook, where you can get this figure if you want it. And otherwise, yeah, I highly recommend this figure. Just before I go, I'm going to just mention a couple of things. I'm going to be doing a couple more game review type things coming up. I'm going to be using a bit more gameplay footage for the next few, and I'm going to start doing some written film reviews on the website within the next couple of weeks. And also, I've got 3 figures on the way to me at the moment in the mail, but after I've received them and done a bit of a pickups video on them, I won't be picking up any figures for a couple of months, simply because I've got a couple of events coming up and etc. and I want to be I don't want to be spending too much at the moment, so I'm going to stay away from buying anything new for a couple of months. But I've got hundreds of Kaiju figures, so it's not going to affect the reviews at all, because I've got so many that I've got plenty of episodes worth before I start picking up new stuff. Also, MCN Manchester this year, as well as Wales Comic Con this year, I'm going to be filming while I'm there, because the last couple of years both conventions in 2014 I did pick up Kaiju related things, but at the time I wasn't doing I did show some of the Wales Comic Con ones, which with the Pacific Rim knife head figure and the Colossal Time figure. But I didn't show anything that I picked up from MCN. I picked up a couple of Godzilla figures, etc. So yeah, this year now, 2015, at Wales Comic Con and at MCN Manchester, I'm going to be taking the camera with me. I'm going to be doing a bit of filming while I'm there, and I'm going to be recording whilst I do some pickups. And have a bit of a special episode, and then I'll be obviously reviewing things that I picked up from there. So yeah, I'm hopefully going to be trying to do more of that kind of thing, and I'm just going to be generally trying to do a little bit more stuff. I'm going to be doing the reviews as normal every week, but there's going to be some more stuff coming, some game stuff, some written things on the website, so just keep an eye out, and as always, like, comment and subscribe, and thanks for sticking around, guys. I'll see you guys next week for episode 10.